Hello, this afternoon I have the privilege of interviewing Steve Ware. I'm Patty Stultz at the White County Public Library. It's good to have you with us, Steve.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, you're more than welcome. I think we need to reminisce a little bit about how Sparta used to be. Is there anything that comes to mind that you might like to emphasize on?
Well, there's lots of things. I grew up in Sparta, lived on Windsor Drive, and my grandfather lived on Gaines Street, and Patty lived on Gaines Street.
Right.
And that used to be a tree-lined street with lots of leaves during the fall,
Right.
which I still remember the smell of the burning leaves walking home from school, from East Sparta City School or the high school. And some of the things that I remember the most were I had a paper route. I was in Boy Scouts. I played sports. I did lots of things in the community. My dad was a Boy Scout master, and I think he touched hundreds of lives of young men here in the county.
Right.
And I think they will all remember him with fond memories.
Yes. And Gaines Street was the main thoroughway at the time. It was before Balkman Way was built, and that was the main route to.
Many of the leading community members lived on that street.
They did. The mayor, Balkman.
Balkman, the bankers
Right.
lived on. That was not their name. I'm trying to think.
Baker.
I'm trying to think of his name. That was the Commerce Union Bank founder. My grandfather, who was a politician and an entrepreneur, lived there. The Cardwells lived there. In fact, they're our next door. Their house is our next door neighbor.
Right.
Everybody knows James Cardwell from the Oldhams Theater.
Dr. Blankenship.
Dr. Blankenship. Across the street was Ms. Tom, who was. Many people took music lessons from her. She lived in the log cabin. My first grade teacher and postmaster, Mr. and Ms. Andrews, lived on that street. The Keeslands lived on the street. So we've touched base with a lot that have lived there.
Right.
My uncles, the Paul Howards and Floyd Howard lived around there.
Cecil and Christine Smith.
Yep.
And the Fishers were living there at the time also.
Yeah, and well, the Smith house I delivered papers to, but none of the others on Gaines Street. Bobby Powell delivered the rest of the papers on that street, and I wanted those streets, but I never could get him from him.
Did you ride a bicycle?
I rode a bicycle. I rode, this was in 1963. I got up around 4 o'clock in the morning, rode across town to some place where they dropped off all of the newspapers for all of us boys. That had a paper route, and then we usually brought them back over to Charlie Pfeiffer's gas station, which was the Gulf station on Broadway.
Right.
And we would all sit there and fold our papers, and then we'd go out on our individual routes. And we did this twice a day and once on Sunday.
We were talking about the expositor office.
The expositor office, I believe, was still on the square at that time. And I remember my dad stopping where the expositor is now every single morning to get the mail and take his key in. I'd go with him sometimes, and he'd have to drag me out because I always looked at the wanted posters. They were on the bulletin board there. So we got the mail, and then we would go down to where the South Carter Street Park is now. That was our property where the park is. But when we delivered papers, we would do twice a day, rain or shine, snow, whatever. And then especially in the colder months, I would come home and I just could not eat supper. I'd feel so full of hot chocolate.
Oh, okay.
and cookies that would take pity on me and bring me in and say, Stephen, you look cold. Let's come in and have some.
That was sweet. Well, tell something about around the square, what you remember, what it looked like.
Well, the square was, growing up to me, was just a tree-lined spot that was cool, that was friendly, that had all of the men of the county. At one point, they're sitting out there whittling, and
at the courthouse.
They at the courthouse on the benches in front and to the side. There was a music stand, I think, there, which Governor Clement would come sometimes and hold events there.
Right.
I mean, that was where when they had Corn Pone Day, I think starting in the early 70s.
Right.
That was all focused around the courthouse.
Right. That
And
was a lot of fun. At the bank, we used to dress up, and when the bank was where the City Hall is now.
Yep,
It's First National Bank.
and which reminds me of the events we had. I don't know if you remember it, but when I was maybe 10 to 12, 13 years old, Sparta used to have set aside 1 or 2 days a year to welcome travelers through the county.
Right.
And where the First Tennessee Bank is now, the old Commerce Union Bank, and where the loan place is now, it used to be a shaded grove where it was set up with tents and food and refreshments, and people would stop coming in from wherever they were going, because that was the main road from
Right.
Nashville to Washington, D.C. And they would come in and have coffee and drinks, and it was just a lot of fun. And I don't think we do that anymore.
No, I don't think we do. Something else I was thinking of, there used to be a restaurant that was in front of Hunter's Funeral Home or close to it, that was a bus or
That was the diner.
the diner. Yeah. What was the name of that? I forgot.
Quite honestly, I don't remember that.
Yeah.
I've seen pictures of it, and it looked, and I think it was just a little diner.
Probably.
And everybody out there right now is going, "Oh yeah, I know where that is."
Yeah. Well, and then the Sparta Hotel.
Sparta Hotel.
Was where,
My uncle and aunt Webb, Jane and John Webb, ran that for many years, and as did several other people. I remember going in there, and the little corner store beneath the corner of the hotel was everything from a service station to I think Ben Sparkman's clothing store.
Yeah.
That he had there at one point. Of course, all that's gone now.
Right. That's when the hotel burnt, and then now it's the amphitheater.
And right around there was several stores, several small stores, and then leading up to Oldhams Theater, there were several small stores there, and then there was a big garage where Hiders 5 and 10 eventually wound up.
Right.
And I remember that place burning twice when I was a kid. And once when it was a garage, and once when it was Hiders.
Right.
And then next to that was Oldhams Theater, run by James Cardwell.
And then where Metcalf Park is now was a dealership, car
Ford.
dealership.
That was Tuck Metcalf's
Right. So,
dealership.
so things have changed. We had a lot of little shops that we don't really have now. I think
one thing that strikes me about looking at the older pictures is the amount of cars and traffic and people that were parked in town doing their business there.
Every Saturday.
Every Saturday, everything was closed on Wednesday afternoon because they were open on Saturday mornings.
Right. We all went to town on Saturday.
And on Sunday, there was 3 pharmacies in town. There was Nelson's and Officers, Smith's Drugs, and Warwick's on across town. And they would take turns opening every Sunday. There'd only be one pharmacy in town open, but they would take turns and open up.
Right.
And because everything else was closed.
And then too, if you remember, doctors used to come to your homes.
They did. Dr. Mitchell was ours, and we went to Dr. Mitchell and Dr. Roberts' office, and Leighton Smith was a family member of ours, and we had good relationships with them. In fact, my mother and dad knew them all very, very well. I did kind of looked at them askance because I wanted to see if they had a shot machine in their bag.
I know what you mean. Well, you know, we were fortunate enough on Gaines Street too to have Cooper's little general store, whatever you want to call it. It was next door to my mother and daddy's, and I have a lot of fond memories going there.
That's where
and
the fragrant mushroom started, isn't
right,
it? Yeah.
And then Stamps Grocery. So you had the option to go either or. And sometimes I'd go down to Cooper's and entertain. I would sing and get cold drinks or something.
Well, just in that area from your house down to Oak Street and down to Windsor Drive over to South Young Street and around, there were probably 4 grocery stores, 4 little,
Right.
we call them convenience stores nowadays, but they were.
Right.
Frank Williams had one, Eston and Nettie Fern Hatfield had
Right.
one on South
Yeah.
Young. And
The railroad went through there on Gain Street also. Do you remember that?
yes, it does. I remember them, and,
Yeah.
and I remember when they took it up. And as a matter of fact, when the railroad was taken up, they paved it over at the depot
Oh,
across town.
okay.
And when the mayor redid all the sidewalks here in town, they uncovered some of the old railroad, which was still there.
Oh,
And
okay.
I took a couple of pictures of it because I was on one of my daily walks.
Right.
And I didn't know it was still there, but
Yeah, you might not remember. I remember convoys going to Crossville. They'd stop at the railroad track and watch for the train so the convoys could come through.
the National Guard.
No, it was the regular army.
Well, Dad was National Guard,
Mhm.
and he was a pilot in the National Guard, and consequently he was associated with the Cookville Guard and the Sparta National Guard also, and they would leave by train
Mm-hmm.
from the depot,
Yeah.
and they would go down to Fort Stewart, Georgia for about 2
Mhm.
weeks, and I think they just had fun down there.
Yeah.
But
Well, you remember the Ray House?
that was run by my 5 great grandmothers,
Right.
great aunts and great grandmother,
Yeah.
the Ray sisters.
Of course, it's gone now too.
It's gone. The Rays they're spelled RHEA,
Mm-hmm.
and that's on my dad's side, and then my middle name is Ray because that's where my grandfather Hubbard Ray and Leela Ray and Hubbard ran the bank, the Commerce Union Bank there.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so we call them the Country Rays and the
City Rays.
and the RHEA is
Oh,
the City
okay.
Rays.
Okay.
Yeah, to keep them from getting confused.
Oh, okay. And then we had Miss Claras across town.
That was the place to go.
That was, and they had a round table. Everybody sat around, and mostly men, I think, sat and drank their coffee and
Well,
tried to solve the problems of the
I
world.
remember at the
their
Ray House.
motel.
At the Ray House Motel, they had the best yeast rolls
Oh,
that you could
okay.
ever imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And I can just barely remember that, and remember going in there on Sundays after church
Mm-hmm.
and looking at the fans up in the ceiling. The ceilings were very, very tall, and they had these fans that were strategically placed around the room, and they were all driven by a pulley.
Okay.
by one mower and they would all go around
Okay.
but if you wanted yeast rolls and fried chicken, you went to the Ray House. But if you wanted desserts, you went to
Miss Claras.
Miss Clara's.
Yeah. Well, talking about Oldhams Theater, do you remember being able to get in on
Milk carton tops.
carton tops?
Yes, ma'am. That was that was just the best way that a kid could get in there, because you didn't have any money. You'd
Right.
have to
Mm-hmm.
either go return Coke bottles and get the change from that, or get the milk caps that your mom and dad had saved.
Right.
And
You remember Leslie? He'd come
Les-
down and shine his flashlight if you
James
wouldn't behave
Carville
him.
and Lester ran a tight ship
Yeah,
there.
they did.
and he would come shine his flashlight on you if you were being rowdy or talking. And
Right.
And-
Well, things have really changed. You used to could drive around the square, but I don't know what you'd call it now.
no, it's the traffic flow has definitely changed.
Uh-huh.
And I think it tore the heart out of the town when the courthouse was replaced by the
yeah.
other one, because they cut down all the trees and everybody moved to a different spot for
Exactly.
business.
Yeah,
Uh,
it took a lot away from the old timers. They'd whittle and chew their tobacco and spit.
That's right. And I also remember that Lester Flatt would sometimes perform down there on the square,
Yeah.
and they would pull up a flatbed trailer
Uh-huh.
and pour Martha White flour meal on the ground, because everybody wanted to dance, and
Mm-hmm.
and that would give you the friction that you needed. And Lester would be up there on the flatbed trailer.
Yeah.
They would people would bring in their walnuts
Right.
from the county in the fall, and set up their wagons and sell the walnuts and
It was a lot of
other
fun.
things that they had brought in to sell.
And then we'd go through, of course, I don't remember myself, but I remember taking my son through the old courthouse to see Santa Claus. That was a big event.
Well,
He didn't like Santa very much.
as a matter of fact, the Rotary Club of Sparta started the
Okay.
Christmas parade
Uh-huh.
in December of 1945.
Oh, okay.
And they gave away, and it's been held, it's each year
Yeah,
since
yeah,
then.
uh-huh.
And they would end up at the courthouse where
Right.
Santa, played
Uh-huh.
by Santa from,
Yeah, what's
through the
Santa?
years,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
and you would go in and get your oranges and your hard candy and tell Santa what you want, and then go out the other door, because it was just one door all the way through,
Right.
in and out.
Yeah. Well, it broke my heart when they tore that down. I was working at First National and watched it as it was being demolished, and it didn't go down easily. It fought.
No, it was a grand old building. It was what year was it torn down? Early 70s?
I think so. Yeah,
I was already graduated, and I think I was probably in the Navy,
I'd say so.
serving that time, and didn't really get to see it go down. It was gone when I got back.
Yeah. Well, it was heartbreaking. It was. Is there anything else that you remember that you'd like to share about our community?
Well, I remember that people were concerned about each other. There was a great comity of people that would help each other out. There were not many areas of strife that I remember. We grew as a city and a town, and I think we've evolved into what we are today.
Right. Well, neighbors help neighbors then, and us kids, we could get up early and just take off and go wherever, and if you got in trouble, there was always a parent watching out for you, and they weren't afraid to spat you on the rump either if you needed it.
I think I probably had about 10 or 15 mothers.
Right.
That, you thought you got away with it,
but you never did.
You really never did. Yeah.
Well, things have changed, and sometimes they say for the better, but I wonder.
Well, if you know, I think the city and the town and will continue to grow with the advent of the Sparta Green Market.
Yeah.
That brought back businesses to open up in the evening to
Right.
serve the crowd that came, and I think people have discovered how much fun it is to be downtown when there is something like that.
Right.
And one of the things is that on Facebook, I started this page called "I Know Someone from Sparta, Tennessee," Yurt. And I started about 10 years ago, and it was just kind of a place where you could come in and do what we're doing now, talk about the history, show the pictures and things.
Well, for people that's not familiar with the word yurt, explain your definition and when it might have started.
Well, nobody really knows when it started. The earliest proven example that we have of it is from one of the high school newspapers in 1935, where somebody was talking about Yurt Arlene, and that was her nickname, the Yurt. And from what I understand, Yurt was a greeting of hello or goodbye, or an affirmation of fun, or just yeah, boy, that's it, yurt, and you could really emphasize it by going yurt with a pump. And so it's kind of like a aloha. It serves that purpose. And Herman England used to tell me that when he was in World War II in Germany, that he was directing traffic along one way, and big convoys would come by, and he said one day some truck went by and somebody on the truck hollered out, "Yurt, Herm." And I said, "Well, who was it?" And he says, "I have no idea who it was, but I knew he was from Sparta."
Yeah, well, I guess you think we've about covered
I think
everything?
I think we have. Thank you for having me. I've
Well,
enjoyed
you're more
this.
than welcome, and I've enjoyed this, and I hope the rest of the audience that's watching and listening will enjoy it as well. And thank you again, Steve.
Thank you very much for asking me. I
Appreciate
appreciate
you.
it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.